They've been called wannabes.
Identity thief.
Race shifter.
They have been called indigenauts.
Oh, playing Indian is another one as well that we use.
Pretendians.
Pretendian is short for Pretend Indian, meaning someone who falsely claims to be Indigenous but can't prove it in any meaningful way.
They first tried to get rid of us, right? And then they tried to assimilate us. And when all of those things failed, they said, well, if we can't get rid of you, we'll just become you.
Pretendian is a controversial term. Some people have decided that pretend is too gentle of a word, that they're actually doing something a lot more dangerous than just playing pretend.
Cultural appropriation has moved on to actual identity appropriation.
There's always been Pretendians. I think a really famous example in Indigenous communities would be Iron Eyes Cody.
People start pollution, people can stop it.
I feel like we've seen such a higher frequency in recent years because now the benefits that people can reap from claiming an Indigenous identity have increased tenfold.
For the first time in Canadian history, there are advantages to being Indigenous. And in an act of colonial violence, Pretendians are exploiting this moment, stealing much-needed space, opportunity, and benefits from actual Indigenous peoples.
People can get job opportunities. They can get scholarships and bursaries. They get roles in television and film.
You know, applying for grants. In many cases, you apply for a job in government or a big corporation. There's a box there that says, are you Indigenous, Métis, Inuit, etc. You tick it off and nobody follows up. That means you have a head start in getting a good job.
Industries where you can capitalize on an Indigenous aesthetic are particularly vulnerable, I think, to Pretendian claims.
There may even be psychological relief for those making false claims.
People do not want to feel complicit in colonialism and the kind of violence that has been done to Indigenous peoples. They want to feel that they're the good guys, that their ancestors were the good guys. There's a real incentive to say, I am part Mi'kmaq, I am part Cree, I am part Cherokee. And then people don't have to feel like they are literally living in these lands and benefiting based on the dispossession and violence that happened to Indigenous people and the theft of Indigenous land.
False claims aren't always intentional or malicious, at least in the beginning. They're often the result of unchecked family lore and wishful thinking.
You hear from your uncle, your grandparents, that, yeah, supposedly great uncle so-and-so was part Native. And it gets passed down through the generations till basically people just believe it without taking the time to accurately assess its validity.
Pretendians should not be confused with people who are trying to reconnect with their Indigenous heritage in the aftermath of cultural genocide.
There's a big difference between somebody whose parent left the reserve or the community, or whose grandparent was forcibly relocated or went to residential school, but you still have cousins, aunties, uncles, grandparents, and somebody who is looking back to 1640.
The number of our ancestors increases exponentially the further that we look back. We all come from 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents, and so on. If you go back 20 generations, we're talking thousands of ancestors. Today, there are cases of people scouring historical records claiming to be Indigenous based on ancestors many generations ago, who may or may not have been authentically Indigenous. So what does it really mean to prioritize one ancestor in a family tree that's otherwise filled with Europeans?
You've got many generations of your family and ancestors living as white people, not subject to the laws that Indigenous people were subject to, the oppressive, racist hierarchy laws. And then you're going to claim one ancestor among all of those. It's really a way of disowning one's white privilege and the experience of many generations of one's family.
Pretendianism harms Indigenous peoples and communities in numerous ways.
They're taking grants, they're taking monies designed for Native advancement, Native arts, Native business, and using it for their own expenses.
We think of some of the classic cases that we've seen in the last few years, a famous writer, a famous director, a famous attorney. We see people that are normatively attractive and intelligent according to settler white standards. They look and move and talk the way that settlers want people to talk, right? They don't want to have to work hard to relate to people who they are actually really uncomfortable relating to. And so it allows them to say that they're doing inclusion, that they're making substantive changes, when in fact, they're just bringing people in and holding people up and putting people on platforms that are just white people, basically, but they're maybe dressing up as an Indian or putting on a story of historical trauma, showing that they have overcome. The implication being, why aren't all these other Indigenous people overcoming, when in fact, these people haven't overcome anything that Indigenous people have had to overcome because they're white people.
It's extremely frustrating, as I think every Indigenous person who has lived through trauma, generational trauma, ongoing colonialism. We don't get to just pick up and put down Indigenous identities when it benefits us. And it makes me angry that any actual Indigenous person also has to feel like that they have to prove themselves in this way now.
Determining somebody's belonging to an Indigenous nation is a matter of Indigenous sovereignty. It's about our ability to choose who our people are by whatever means we see fit. Unfortunately, proving that somebody isn't Indigenous is pretty complicated. But proving that you are Indigenous can be pretty straightforward.
People will say, oh, you're Indigenous, where are you from? Maybe I know your grandpa or something like that. And then this exchange happens where, yes, we're chatting and we're getting to know each other, but through that also, I'm telling them who I am, who I'm accountable to, where my knowledge comes from. Those are all, I think, part of that exchange. And I think some people would call that protocol.
Indigenous issues are taking up space in the mainstream more than ever before. Pretendian exposés are now nationwide scandals, and they seem to be happening more and more. There could be hundreds, if not thousands, of cases yet to be uncovered.
When we're having these conversations, it's also important to check in not just with Indigenous people writ large, but displaced people, people who have those complex histories, who have been raising alarm bells for a really long time that we could be hurting some of our own people when we don't have these conversations with care.
In the common framing of the problem of pretendianism, people are often talking about identity and what does Indigenous identity mean? I don't think that's really fundamentally the question at play here or the problem that we are confronting. It's white people. What is their problem? Why are they intent on appropriating our identities in the same way that they have appropriated the land? They have disrupted our governance systems, right? It's one more act of colonization. We really need to turn the camera back onto the settler. Why are they continuing to appropriate every last thing and take the gaze off of Indigenous people? Because we are not the problem in this issue.